day that is a time of remembrance. And you can hear me, right? Without the mic?
Yes.
And the communion service that we're going to celebrate in just a moment is the service that Jesus implemented specifically for us to remember what he did for us when he went to the cross. And we want to do that in just a minute. But I also think that it would be appropriate for us to take a few minutes as we come to the end of our time together to remember some of the things that the Lord has shown us, some of the ways that the Lord has touched us during this trip. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the beginning of the trip, and I'm just going to read the places that we went through to kind of jog your memory, okay? And I want you to listen to them in a reflective way. And I want you to listen to the places and listen and remember and see if there's a place where God met you, or God touched you, or God spoke to you in a special way. And then after we've just had a moment to think and reflect, I'm going to give you an opportunity to just speak out and to say, Lord, thank you for meeting me at, and name the place. Okay? We visited a lot of places. We started with Caesarea, Herod the Great on the coast, who was a great builder of buildings, in contrast to Jesus, who was a great builder of people. We went to Megiddo, a strategic fortress that has been there for years and years, where people have tried to control movement of populations and armies. Jesus didn't raise an army in that way, but he had raised an army in another way. We went to Mount Carmel, where we rehearsed how God showed his strength, that he was God, in contrast to the gods of this world and the Baal and the Baals. We went to the Nazareth village, where we experienced some of what it was like in the daily life of Jesus, and saw some of the rooms and carpentry and how they made clothes and how they crushed olives. We went to the precipice, where Jesus was taken and rejected by the people in his own town, and walked away from their midst. We went to the place of the Annunciation, where Mary was told by the angel who it was that she was going to give birth to. We went to Cana, and we celebrated not only Jesus' first miracle, but his commitment and value of marriage. We went to Arbel. We overlooked the north coast of the Sea of Galilee, and the concentrated area where Jesus did so many of his miracles, and yet people didn't believe. And we don't want to be those who see Jesus do great things and not believe. We went to Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus asked his disciples, who do men say that I am, and who do you say that I am? An important question for all of us to consider. We traveled through the Yardenette, through the Golan Heights, and then down to the Yardenette baptismal site, where we remembered the baptism of Jesus, but we're also able to enter into that experience in the Jordan River, as many of us were baptized there. The next day we had an incredible worship service on the Sea of Galilee, and we were able to sing together, listen to his word, pray with one another. We went to the ancient boat museum and saw a boat not unlike the one that Jesus called his disciples to, not a ministry of fishing for fish, but a ministry of fishing for men. We went to the Mount of Bad Attitude. Mount of Bad Attitude. The Mount of Beatitude, where Jesus spoke against the bad attitude and demonstrated that he had authority, and he spoke with authority, and not like all of the other teachers of his day, and challenged people to enter into his kingdom, which was so different from the kingdoms around him. We went to Tabgha. We remembered the loaves and the fishes and how Jesus was able to multiply that food for the 5,000 people that were there. We went to the church of the primacy of Peter. We remembered how even though Peter had denied Jesus, Jesus restored him to ministry and gave him a prominent position in his church and said, Peter, do you love me more than these? A question for us. Do you love me more than whatever it is that might be calling our attention away from him? We went to Capernaum, a place where he did many miracles. Healed Peter's mother-in-law, healed the centurion's servant, healed the woman with the issue of blood, many others at that location. And then we went to Magdala, where he had called Mary to follow him. Mary the Magdalene. We went to the Valley of the Doves, walked the path where Jesus walked. We went to Bethshan. We rehearsed how Saul and his sons were killed on that mountain. And the kingdom was taken from Saul because he was not a man who gave God his whole heart. And God replaced him with David, who would be a man that had a heart after him. We went to En Harod, Gideon's spring, and showed how God used a small number of people to accomplish a great battle win. And he wanted it to be a small group of people because he wanted them to know that it wasn't through their strength that they had been able to win the victory. It was through his strength that they were able to win. We drove by Dothan, where Joseph was sold into slavery. And he's probably wondering to himself, I had a dream. What happened to it? And yet God fulfills his promises and the dreams, but he often does it in ways that aren't the ones that we think about how he's going to do it. And he was faithful to Joseph to fulfill his dream. We also saw in that place where Elisha's servant was not able to see the power of God that was with them when they were surrounded by armies. But when God opened his eyes, he realized that there were more with him than there were with the enemy. And when God opens our spiritual eyes, we realize that there's more there than we see. We went to Bethlehem, the place of Jesus' birth. We sang in the chapel. We sang in the cave. We're reminded that Jesus didn't come to the highest of people, he came to the lowest of people, and he took the lowest place. And he identified with the lowest estate of people. God exalted him because of that. We went to the place of the Nativity, and we battled the crowds to go and touch the star. What a contrast to the night of Jesus' birth, when there was no one there and had to be announced to shepherds to come and witness. We went to the Herodian, another of Herod's fortresses, and showing his strength and what's left of his kingdom. We went to the Yad Vashem, and we remembered the Holocaust, and maybe the event that God actually used to call his people back to the land, and begin to make it, again, a land that's flowing with milk and honey, instead of a desert, and made the desert bloom, and brought his people back. Promised that he would put his spirit in them, something for which we still need to pray. Went to the Israel Museum, and we saw the Shrine of the Book, and we saw the Temple of Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. We saw Pilate's stone. We saw the place of trumpeting stone, and we're taken back to the time of Christ. We went to Masada, another of Herod's fortresses. There were a lot of places, huh? We went to Qumran, saw where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. We floated in the Dead Sea. I wonder if Jesus ever did that. We drove by Zacchaeus tree, the sycamore tree, where a tax collector was called by Jesus and said, "This too is a son of Abraham. I'm going to your house. Your household will be saved today." We also went to, we drove by Jericho, where the walls came tumbling down. God showed his strength that they didn't need to fight, they just needed to trust in him. And then walls would come down. He could bring down those walls in our life as well. We went to the pool of Bethesda, where the crippled man was told to take up his pallet and walk. Caused all kinds of arguments. But Jesus did what he did. And he demonstrated his strength as a result of that. And many of you were anointed with oil there, believing that the same God who was able to raise that crippled man can bring healing to our lives today. We went to St. Anne's Church, where we sang, "It is well with my soul." And even when times are hard and there are difficulties with the outward circumstances, when we are people of faith, we can say, "It is well with my soul." We went to the Antonia Fortress. We saw the pavement on which Jesus was tried, the place where he was beaten, the place where they put the crown of thorns and the robe on him and they mocked him, and they took him down the Via Dolorosa, which we walked, to the place of the skull, Golgotha. We also saw there, in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the possible site of the tomb, just as there's a site here in the Gordy tomb. We went to the city of David. We were reminded of this king who had a heart after God's own heart, and that God chose from the shepherd fields to become the king and the unifier of his nation, and the one who would be the household through which he would call the Messiah, Jesus, who has come and who will come again. We walked through by the Gihon Spring. We walked down through part of Hezekiah's tunnel when the forces of the Assyrians were coming against Hezekiah, and we trusted in the Lord, took action to defend. We went to the Siloam pool, where we saw where Jesus healed the man that was blind. And there were all kinds of arguments over whether he should have healed him on the Sabbath day. But the key thought was, those of you who think that you see are blind. Those of you who realize that you are blind are the ones who have the opportunity to see as you trust in God. We went to the southern steps where Jesus taught, where he often entered into the temple, where he called out those who were hypocrites and said, "You're like these whited sepulchres over here on the Mount of Olives," and yet spoke compassion to those who were willing to demonstrate faith in him. And then we went to the Western Wall, where the people of Israel today is as close as they can get to the temple, and are still looking to the day when their Messiah will come. Would that they would realize that he already has, and they would put their faith in Jesus. And then we came to the Garden Tomb this morning, and here we can reflect with the atmosphere of what it was like in that time. He was crucified along a road. He was laid in a garden tomb, but he was resurrected on the third day. What an incredible experience to be able to see the place. So I want to give you an opportunity right now, just quickly, popcorn style, maybe to just say, "Lord, thank you for touching me," and maybe name the place, and maybe even the way that he touched you. And even if you don't say it out loud, say it to Jesus. "Thank you, Jesus, for leading me here and touching." Who wants to go first?
I'll start.